So look forward to your input. So I think it fits well into the discussions we're having in the morning with Works Councils and co-determination, and also this afternoon during the lunch break. So I'm looking at corporate governance of the firm, what actors can be involved, and which ones seem to be more important for encouraging sustainable behavior, sustainable performance by companies. In particular, I'm looking at 4 different mechanisms, corporate governance mechanisms. One is, how significant institutional investors are as a proportion of the shareholder base. Second one is management. What role does management play through stockholding, for example? What role do employee representatives in the board, referred to as BLR, play? And finally, employee shareholding, which is often recommended by the commission as an alternative to having workers in the board. So, and I'll briefly discuss the sample and the results, and this is an empirical study. But first of all, we look at I look at the 2 major theories of corporate governance, 2 competing theories. One is the property rights theory, the other the stakeholder theory, to see what they might say about what hypotheses there are about what drives sustainability, sustainable corporations. Well, this is all familiar to you. Stock price reflects the long-term value of the company, according to this perspective. There are quite a few critical statements about managers and workers. If you kind of leave them to their own devices, they'll use their power and influence to enhance their own private welfare and not the value of the company. And that the solutions proposed by Jensen and Meckling and so forth is to give managers stock options, give workers stock. And it's very interesting that what they've written about co-determination in the 70s. They basically want to keep workers off the board, don't give them power, and so forth. But this perspective has really said very little specifically about sustainability. Is there a conflict between improving the sustainability of the company versus shareholder value or not? If anyone knows some literature on this, I'd be very grateful for indications about this. If the shareholders do want more sustainability by the company, they might give more remuneration based on sustainability performance by the company. Okay, the main competitor in the corporate governance area is stakeholder theory. Okay, this is a rather diverse set of literature, but in general, the stakeholder theory tends to be a bit critical of the role of institutional investors. There's a lot written on the short-termism of institutional investors and how they might lead the companies to underinvest in long-term value and take shortcuts when it comes to sustainability. Stakeholder theory tends to say, if there's a conflict between shareholder value and sustainability performance, well, sustainability performance should take preference, and the policy prescriptions this perspective would make is to give these stakeholder groups more power, for example, to put workers on the board, and also to reduce the power of institutional investors through financial transactions tax, loyalty shares, and that sort of thing. So. Okay, so what I did is try to take a look at these 4 groups and see empirically to what extent they're correlated with good sustainability performance by companies. I used these stock 600 companies. Those are European companies between 2014, 2018. Looked at the influence of these different mechanisms. Institutional investors defined by percentage of company shares owned by institutional investors. Managers, percentage of company shares owned by managers, percentage of workers having voting seats on the board, and worker shareholders are measured by percentage of company shares held by employees. The outcome variables are scores on sustainability performance. I'll say something about that in a second. This is maybe where I would disagree a bit with Dieter Sadowski. The quasi-experimental design doesn't take care of all methodological problems. I use a different approach here, multivariate regression analysis with a panel structure, random effects, and that sort of thing. So, but we can certainly discuss that. The outcome variables, they're provided by a ratings agency called Vigio Eiris, and they rate companies on a scale of 0 to 100 on a whole slew of indicators. They're re-rated on a biennial basis. And what I'm doing is using the kind of overall scores in these 6 policy areas: human resources, environment, human rights, business behavior, which is mainly behavior towards consumers, community, and corporate governance. Okay, and I have control variables in here, which are the headquarters country, industry, and that sort of thing. Okay, so just to keep this without getting into the statistical details, so if you see this first row here, this is blur. That's the influence of workers in the board. And if you look across here, you'll see green on 5 of the 6 policy areas. That means that the strength of workers on the board is positively and significantly correlated with better performance in 5 of these 6 policy areas. Community is also positive. It's not significant, but it's still positive. So this suggests that having workers on the board is very good for improving sustainability performance by companies. If you look at employee shareholder as well, that's sort of positive in every area except corporate governance, but significant only in the areas of human resources and community. So that suggests that employee shareholding is good for sustainability, but not as strongly correlated as workers on the board. Interestingly enough, where executives have a lot of shareholdings, there's a number of items where there's negative performance. And then in the case of free float, that's the percentage of institutional investors, you actually see positive performance on all of the 6 indicators and significant in 3 of these cases. So that would sort of, caution the stakeholder approach by saying that, institutional investors are detrimental for sustainability performance. And finally, size is really, really important. That suggests that the larger companies are more concerned with things like consumer branding, with public pressure, and that sort of thing. And also that larger companies happen to generally have more resources for, let's say, sustainability staff or that sort of thing. So in conclusion, we haven't killed one theory relative to the other, but the stakeholder theory does seem to indicate that certainly putting workers on the board can enhance sustainability performance, but also the role of institutional investors who seem to be increasingly concerned with things like environment and social governance. First of all, from an ethical point of view, but secondly, because they don't want to have reputational risk and share price collapsing because the media discovers they're using slave labor or things like that. The theories need to be developed some more, but I think this helps support the kind of pluralist view that different stakeholders can play in developing the, let's say, the objective function of the firm.